All right, welcome to Unstuck Kids Speak Out Episode 1. Had some technical difficulties on the brand page, so we're going to do this on my personal page, ask Sarah some questions, and then we'll upload it to the Unstuck Facebook page shortly. So Sarah Jackson's going to be my guest. I'll be able to invite her in. You just got to give Facebook access. All right, there she is. Oh, it worked.
Hi.
Hey there. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Sorry about all the delays and everything.
It's all right.
So there'll be a little bit of a delay between you and I for a second in the questions that I ask and your answer.
Okay.
But basically, thank you so much for sticking with me, and I really appreciate you you helping me out. There's always technical difficulties on the first episode of the show. So how are things doing out there?
Pretty good. I had surgery.
Uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
On wisdom teeth?
No, just my foot.
Uh-oh. Did you break your foot?
No, I don't have much of an arch in my foot, so they had to put like this metal thingy in my foot.
Can you flip the camera around and show me your cast?
Oh, it's not on right now.
All right. So, I wanted to, one of the things that was helpful last month when Vanessa and Charlotte were on was just kind of getting their point of view about OCD and dealing with it every day from your experience when things were really bad with you and your family, and now learning to deal with it. So if you wouldn't mind, taking me back years ago when you first learned about OCD, and what went through your mind when somebody said, this is obsessive compulsive disorder, and put that diagnosis out there?
Well, I didn't really know what to think about it because I didn't know what it was. So, yeah, I just didn't know what to do. I don't really remember. It was kind of a while ago.
Do you remember wanting to go to the internet and read about it, or your parents buying you a book or two about it?
No, not really. Well, they bought me one book when it got harder, when OCD got bigger and stuff. So it was one of those books where you write and draw in it and stuff, and it was kind of an activity book, and kind of explain OCD to you, saying it was like a little angry kid in a grocery store that wanted a candy bar, and if you gave in, the next time he'll want it again. But yeah, that's how it was.
Did that explanation make sense to you? You were how old when you first learned that you had OCD?
I was 8.
So you were 8. It wasn't you're not as old as you are now. So did that analogy make sense to you? The kid in the candy store, did you go, okay, I get it. If I keep giving in, it'll get stronger?
Yeah, because that's kind of how my therapist explained it at the time. Well, she said it was more like an angry dog that wanted food.
Yeah, so that so the angry dog was another way your therapist talked about it. So the angry dog, would keep barking until you fed it?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you didn't feed it, what would happen?
It would get mad at me and stuff, or try to bite me.
When did you and your family realize, okay, something's wrong? I don't know what it is, but
I never really noticed anything was wrong, but my parents did. My parents just thought it was me being disobedient or something. But then they did more research on it, and they found out that it's not really how kids are supposed to act. So that's when they found out and started finding a therapist, and eventually they found the right one.
And when do you remember what your initial first OCD fear was, or the thing that first made you have a big anxiety issue?
I don't. Actually, when I would go to sleep at night, I would be afraid that there would be a monster looking at me through the window. So then I would have to make sure my curtains were flat against the wall, so nothing could so I couldn't see the window, but I could only see the curtains.
And that when you were afraid that like what, like a monster would come in or a burglar?
Mm-hmm.
And did you think, if you remember at that time, was there any process going on in your brain where you said like how are the curtains going to stop the bad guy?
No. It was just more of like them seeing me through the window than them actually coming
So
through.
Okay. So it was like trying to hide yourself from them.
Mm-hmm.
And what were some of the ways that you tried initially, before you learned about OCD and exposure therapy, that you realized something was wrong?
Like me, myself, or my parents when I see something was wrong?
I would say both. Like some of the ways you tried to cope with your fears before you learned about OCD. Like, did you, did your parents have to help you out in certain ways or things like that?
No, they didn't really know about it until like it got much bigger. And when I don't really know, they didn't really know much about it because I never even talked about it because I didn't want them to know about it.
So you hid your OCD or you hid your worries.
Mm-hmm.
And what were some of the ways you tried to do that?
Well, it was at nighttime when I would be in bed and like when I would fix my curtains and like fix my covers and stuff. And my parents would be in their bedroom.
So they would like tuck you in, you pretend to be asleep, and when they left the room, you'd go through all your checklist of things you had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. So at first, you had these worries about having your curtains straight and making sure that the somebody from the outside wouldn't get in. How did it change and grow from there? Like, what was the other issues that you might have had or other concerns that you had?
Well, then I would get a bit more picky with my the curtains and make sure they were like perfectly straight. And then I would start making sure my animals were in the perfect position and in a certain position.
So you started fixing and making things like the perfection thing.
Mm-hmm. Kind of, yeah.
And how were you able to deal with it at school?
Can you ask the question again?
I said, how did OCD affect you at school or outside the home?
It didn't affect me that much with school. It just took away time for me being able to go to school. But a little bit, would be with, like when I would leave school at the end of a day, I would be afraid I left something in my locker, so I would actually get one of my friends to look in my locker for me, and I would kind of like bribe her with candy. I'll be like, okay, here's some candy. If you'll just go look in my locker and make sure I didn't leave anything, then that'll be good. And she would do it, so that kind of helped me out with my OCD.
But Dad, so you're free, you were bribing them with candy, but did your friend ever turn to you and go like, go look yourself, Sarah?
Yeah. But eventually I just got her to do it.
But it was your fear of losing something that you and someone else had to check for you. Was that the kind of like relief you were looking for?
Yes. It's like, well, I can't trust my own eyes, but I can trust their eyes.
So it was like a little bit of self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
When you first learned about OCD, you first started getting into therapy. Did you think OCD was real?
I had never even heard about it, so I didn't really have much of I didn't really get mad that people would say, that the therapist said that I had OCD. Like, I didn't get like all defensive about it because I was like, okay, then there's my problem. But that's about it. I didn't really fight against it.
So you accepted it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool because there are kids like Vanessa. For all our biggest first battle was to get her to tell us that it was real. So accepting it, I think, is pretty huge. Do you remember along the way, because I know that your story is you were treated in Kansas City, then your parents did some stuff with you, and then you went to a facility in, was it Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm.
So do you remember the first kid that you met with OCD? Like the first time you ever were to say, wait, somebody else is just like me.
Yeah, I do. I don't know if I can say her name for like
No, you don't. Yeah.
confidential stuff.
No, don't say her name, but
But
maybe
yeah, I
just.
remember.
And was it like, was there an instant like ability to talk about it, or did that give you some relief knowing somebody else was out there?
Yeah, I was like, whoa, look at all these other kids that are just like me. Then, like, I guess I'm not alone in this fight against OCD, and they can help motivate me, and I'll help motivate them to fight OCD.
Were you able to? So I guess the natural question is, once you met somebody with OCD, do you feel like, okay, we can fight it together? Maybe there's a little more, the ability is there.
Mm-hmm. Because it's like, I can beat this and you can too. So we would like kind of challenge each other.
Did the different kids that you met have different issues that you could help with?
Yes.
When did you first learn about exposure therapy?
Well, when exposure therapy was more of like, when I was at the Casey Cat, here in Kansas City with my therapist, not at Rogers, she would have me do certain things to fight OCD. Like, I would only be able to say goodnight a few times, but of course I would usually say it more because I couldn't really fight OCD at that time. Or if I wanted reassurance, they would only be able to give it to me like twice.
So they had to cut down their interactions with you. Was it hard because your parents were involved in helping you out so much with your rituals? Was it hard for them, you think, to stop?
I think it was hard for them a little bit because they just wanted to help me, but they also knew it was bad for me, so it was hard. Like for me, but also better for me at the same time.
How did your life? So you were able to get treatment. You were able to figure out how you needed to kind of get over your fears, fight them, face them, fight them, and then eventually like deal with them better. How was life different when you got back home? And so how had things? Can you describe how it was before and then after?
Yeah, like as soon as I got home, I had like some stuff I had kept for a while in my bedroom because I was always having kind of anxiety, like, well, maybe I'll need this another time. And it was kind of hard for me to get rid of stuff also. So, as soon as I got back home into my bedroom, I just started taking all this stuff and getting bags of, like 3 big bags of trash and of all this stuff I cleared out of my room because I didn't need.
You were saving stuff so you were able to get rid of it all?
Mm-hmm.
Must have felt good. Did any of your friends ask you questions like, where were you? Or, how did this happen? Or things like that. How did you explain it to them?
Well, I just told them that I have something called OCD, and it's kind of like a video game glitch in your head, and that I was in a hospital, like a residential hospital, up in Wisconsin, so that's where I was.
And because of what you were going through and what you kind of deal with every day with OCD, do you feel like that helped you out when you hear other kids going through problems? Like if you have a friend with an issue, or whether it's a physical or mental issue, do you feel like you're able to identify with them a little bit more? Or
it's like, I know what you're going through, or I've been through hard stuff in my life too, so I can help you out.
Do friends ever seek you out more because they know you've gone through stuff before?
Sometimes.
And one of the things that I think is interesting is explaining to people what OCD is and what OCD isn't. And so how would you, in your own words, describe obsessive compulsive disorder?
Well, like I was saying earlier, it's kind of like OCD is like a video game glitch in your head, and it makes you feel like you have to do something even though you know you don't have to, or it makes you worry about something that you don't really need to, that's not necessary, and makes you feel like you have to do something, or makes you doubt yourself in some places when like the little small voice in your head, yourself, that's not OCD, says that you don't have to doubt yourself, that it, like, myself knows that I've done something correctly, but OCD makes me think, well, maybe you did it incorrectly.
So some of what you had to do was actually learn to trust yourself, and to kind of pick out what thoughts were Sarah's thoughts and what thoughts were, thoughts that you needed to ignore. One of the things I wanted to talk about was, everybody, there's a belief that, you get cured and you get better from things, with a lot of physical illness, like what you're going now with your ankle. There's a process. You had a surgery. You're going to heal, maybe do some physical therapy. And then they probably told you in a month or in 6 months or a certain amount of time, you're going to be better. Do you feel the same thing is true about obsessive compulsive disorder?
Well, yeah, you have to work for it, and it may hurt. Well, not actually physically hurt, but it may be tough for you at sometimes, but you need to still keep pushing during this, and eventually you'll get better and be better than before.
And, when you say get better, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to do something for a little while. It took you a little while longer, right? So it's actually, you got to dedicate some time, and it's not like it's something that happens overnight.
Because it's not going to always be gone, so you have to constantly fight it.
Are you comfortable talking about, we interviewed you, I think, a little over, maybe it was around 2 years ago. Have you had any other issues that you're still dealing with? Do you still do exposure therapies now?
No, I don't.
So you're feeling like, I guess things are kind of in remission.
Yep.
That's great. What was your toughest issue to get over?
Probably reading.
Reading. Is that reading and because you were rereading and reading for some bit of perfection?
Not perfection, because I don't usually like to call some things an OCD perfection, because that's what everybody thinks it is. They think it's perfection or cleaning stuff, but it's more like reassurance that I read something after reading a page or something, and maybe I just read it a bit too fast for comfort. Then OCD will just complain that, well, maybe you missed some of the stuff because you read too fast. So then, even though I know I missed nothing, I would still have to reread over and over again.
And how did you, what was the therapy and exposures that you did to kind of figure out, to get over, to help you read a book without rereading it over and over?
Well, it took a long time for me to finally get over reading. We worked on it a lot here in Missouri, but then it finally went away better and faster when we went to Rogers. When I went to Rogers, and they just wouldn't let me give in at all, even though my parents would kind of let me give in, but it was just harder for me to resist here at home. But since it was like with strangers and I can't really get super mad at them at Rogers, then I would kind of have to do what they say.
When you went in, was there was there a reward system that you would do with at the facility, or as well as at home, to kind of like, make you feel like there's a goal in mind to continue doing your exposures?
Yes, at the hospital, the residential hospital, um, they would have like these outings every week, and if you did your exposures, then you would be able to go.
So there was like, if there was a constant thing to say, if you want to go on this trip this weekend, you got to fight. And did they deal with did they tackle your issues one at a time, or did you kind of do little bits of everything at once, or
little bits of everything at once?
And were some things easier and some things harder?
Yes.
What was the hardest thing? You remember one particular thing you just had such a hard time doing?
Probably reading, and maybe sometimes at night when I would want them to repeat good night and they wouldn't.
So one of the things that we found, and I know that you found doing some events for us as well as last month at the OCD Awareness Week, is you find a lot of people looking for advice or just some help and guidance. Is there anything that you would say to a parent listening about helping their child?
Advice for parents. Wait, just for parents? Or also?
Yeah.
Okay.
First part of parents, then I'm going to ask you a kid question.
I just would say keep on helping your kids, and just if one therapist doesn't work, go to another, and just keep on helping them fight, and be patient with them, but also push them to fight.
Did your parents ever talk to you about or did you ever look at them saying, knowing that they might have read a book or advice that somebody else gave them that helped them? Because like Allie, Vanessa's mom and I, we read a lot of books. Did you ever notice that, anything that you could recommend a parent reading or looking at?
I don't really know what my mom would read about this stuff.
All right, so let's switch gears to kids, because there's a lot of kids that are struggling. One of the big things about the film is that the film tries to do is just show kids, hey, there's others just like me going through it. So any advice for kids going through what you went through?
It's really nice to find some kids other friends and other kids that you meet along the way that also have OCD, so you can both motivate each other. So, like, maybe try to connect with others who have OCD, and keep on fighting even though it's hard, and just know that it will get easier the more you fight.
Yeah, I mean, if there's parents watching or watching this rebroadcast, what I would suggest is doing your best online to create a local support group. There are a lot of different ways to connect and figure out a way you might be able to meet with people around your area once or twice a week, so you parents can talk and then possibly get kids together, or even use the glorious text message to connect kids the best way possible. Because there's a certain once you feel, like Sarah said earlier, she finally met somebody else, she didn't feel alone. It was like, oh, okay, maybe we can do this. And what has been something that you noticed when you're talking to other people, whether it's been an event with a film or otherwise, last month when you did the event in Kansas City, that you find interesting that people brought up about OCD?
I don't really know. There's been so much they say, and I don't really know.
One, I think a lot of parents find that, they're just looking for answers. So just telling them that, you have to advocate for your child, like you said. You have to make sure that you're not giving up and that you're continually to look for the best therapy. Is helpful advice, because sometimes parents just don't know where to turn next, or they think that there's no place else to go, or I've done everything I can. But it's clear that your parents kept pushing and kept looking, and and you recognize that as well. Last question I would have is, that when we interviewed you a while ago, we asked you about, when people say when people misuse OCD. When you hear that now, like if you were to go to school on Monday or go out to a store today and go shopping and you hear somebody use it, what is your reaction, and what do you do?
It just makes me mad because they just use it flippantly and don't even think about what it actually means, and it's just annoying because they just think it's cleaning stuff or organizing stuff or perfection, but it's not. It's much more, and it's an actual mental illness. So they need to actually figure out what it means before they actually use it. Yeah.
So you actually just brought up something that made me realize there's one more question I wanted to ask you, because there is that issue of perfectionism, which people do, which does exist in OCD,
Yes.
but it's also different than just being like, I want to make sure I have no mistakes in my paper. What do you, because you definitely needed to hear things just right, or to have curtains just set up. What was the thing to you, or how could you explain that? What's different than, what you were dealing with, as opposed to just being what most people talk about as being a perfectionist?
It's more of, well, my reassurance was like, well, perfectionism, I guess. It was more of, it got worse the more you did it, but for most people who don't have OCD and are perfectionists, it doesn't get worse for them. It just bothers them, but the OCD perfectionism is just like really big, and it kind of consumes your whole mind when you think about it, when it like bothers you.
Right. So it's something that continues throughout the day. Yeah. Like, so if you, if you had to go somewhere and you thought everything was perfect in your room, and then you left, it was something that was in your head the whole day. Yeah. And I think that's a perfect distinction, because there is that, like, I just want to make this thing I'm working on perfect, but it's a different to work on that thing and then be done with it, and then it never is in your mind again, as opposed to keep going over and over and over. Well, thank you so much for joining me today,
Thank
and
you for
adding your
inviting
wisdom
me.
and your advice, and also dealing with the technical things. I appreciate it. And we hope to talk to you soon. And please, we're really thankful that you obviously did the film, but also that you're taking an active role in your local community with OCD awareness and helping out your local office, which is fantastic.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll talk to you